Hello, everybody, and welcome to Publisher Spotlight from LibraryPass and Comics Plus. My name is John Shableski on behalf of the company, and with me today is my guest, Jim Ottaviani, and he's a publisher of GT Labs, but has a very interesting and varied background, which I think feeds wonderfully into the stories that he tells. You know, Jim, give us a little bit about your whole overview.
This is probably my third career, if you want to count, official things that you do as an adult. And I started as a nuclear engineer and worked for a number of years at that job. I've got a bachelor's and a master's degree in that, headed into librarianship. And I still work for the University of Michigan Libraries. I'm on the digital side and publishing side. And by night and on the weekends, I write comic books or graphic novels, if you prefer, about scientists. So that's like the shortest version I can give.
That works perfectly.
Okay.
So what triggered the first book for you, and what was your first book?
The first book I did was called Two-Fisted Science. It's sort of a portmanteau comic book title from two fairly well-known 50s books, but it was a collection of short stories, mostly about physicists, that I self-published in 1997, something like that. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle money gone bad or gone good, depending on how you want to look at it. The two creators of the Turtles both did some nice things with some of their extra money. One of them set up a publishing company himself. The other put together grants to give to aspiring self-publishers. And I got one of those Xeric grants. I think Gene Yang was in the same year as me of getting a Xeric grant. And so that sort of kicked off what I did. And I'm still at it 24 odd years later.
So you've done some really great books and profiles of personalities in science.
Thank you.
And Feynman and Turing and these other characters, and even stories like dignifying science, like these revealing stories about people like Hedy, Lamar. How did you gravitate toward this kind of storytelling?
How best to describe this? I mean, I've been a comics reader for almost all my life. Since I can remember, I was reading newspaper comics back when there were newspapers, and I still read some daily strips because it's a really fun little jolt of entertainment every day. But started reading comic book comics probably, in when I was around 10 or so, and never really stopped that. But at a certain point, you've read a lot of what start to feel like the same stories. Back in the day, what was mostly available to us through comic stores and through the medium was genre stories, superhero stuff, people in tights, running around, screaming, punching each other. And I, like many people, it's like, all right, those are fun, but maybe that's enough of that. What else can this medium do? And as we mentioned, I have a background in science and in engineering, and I started encountering stories tangentially through the work that I was doing, especially in engineering and in physics. These people sound really interesting. And who is this guy, Heisenberg, who's got all this stuff named after him? Why is the unit of radiation called a Curie? Who is Curie? And eventually you find out that there are interesting stories behind these discoveries and interesting people behind the stories, behind the discoveries. And, I collected enough anecdotes that I thought were really cool and that I loved to tell my friends over lunch or dinner or whatever. And thought, gosh, some of these would be really well suited to being told as comics, but nobody was doing it.
All right.
And to get to the self-publishing thing, I put together a proposal, put together some ideas, even had some scripts partially written and done, and started to talk to publishers. And to a person, the response was, this sounds really cool. This is really interesting. Can't wait to read it when somebody else publishes it.
Right.
as in not us, but I'd like it for myself. And that's how I ended up with applying to the Xeric Foundation and going ahead and doing it myself for a number of years. The world is different now, right? And
Right.
I would say in this respect, much better, because there's lots of books like the things that I do. And there's room for plenty more.
I can imagine you're hearing from more teachers now. Librarians, I give so much of my career now is thanks to librarians. Um,
Mhm.
and I can see where we're beginning to make our way into the classrooms in this space. Are you starting to
Sure.
hear more from educators about your books?
It comes in waves, and it's not predictable. So for a while I was hearing a lot, and then distribution and things like LibraryPass become available, and so they don't have to contact me, they go to you.
Right.
uh, so I wouldn't say it's a regular occurrence, but every X number of weeks, months, whatever you want, however you want to measure it, I will hear from a teacher saying, this was interesting, this was useful, do you have a teacher's guide, what's coming next? Those sorts of questions. But actually, you know, I haven't done a lot of self-publishing in recent years. I'm getting people to pay me advances, which is crazy. So I think a lot of those queries actually go through my publishers now and don't come directly to me, unless somebody just doesn't know how to get in touch with the Macmillan, Simon and Schuster's, Abrams of the world,
Right.
or like I said, just go directly to LibraryPass and say, hey, what's available?
Is it, you mentioned teaching guides. Is
Uh-huh.
that is that a standard part of the process now with each one of your books? Do you find, or do you ask for that, or is it something that's just a naturally developed part of the production process with your
I
book?
think it depends on the book. So, a recent title is Astronauts. I'm pretty sure the publisher put together a teacher's guide for this. The target audience is middle grades,
Right.
and middle grades through high school. For a book like Turing that we were talking about before, that's more targeted towards an adult readership. And, you and I, well, I'll speak for myself. Maybe you go for this, but I do not typically look for a teacher's guide when I pick something up. I'm reading Kindred right now by Octavia Butler, and I know there's that teacher's stuff and discussion questions at the back. I probably won't dip into that once I finish the book,
Right.
because that's not the type of reading I'm doing with this book at this time.
Sure.
So I think it very much depends on who the intended audience is. And I would say for the stuff that I write for that's mainly targeted towards kids, ages 10 to 16, teacher's guides happen.
Oh yeah.
Otherwise, not so much.
Right. Right. Gotcha. When you pick a subject, um, do you see a common denominator with all the personalities behind these big science events that you do these profiles on? Like Feynman, it struck me that he was this multi-talented genius who was a musician. I remember some stories about him from when I was young, but then there were so much that you reminded me of. Uh,
Hmm.
is there similarities in those other scientists you've covered, that those music is part of their background, or there's something
Hmm.
like that?
That's a really interesting question. I haven't tried to tease out what draws me to a particular character. Um, Most people have a great deal of charisma, I would say, that comes across even if you haven't met them personally.
Hmm.
I didn't get to meet Stephen Hawking personally. I sat in his office. I leaned over his bed at his house, but he was not there at the time.
I'm sure he was happy for that.
Yeah, I think in that particular moment, it was best that we weren't in the same place. Um, and I would say even for that book that I just showed you, the astronauts book, we picked a not particularly famous astronaut, but I gravitated towards her because as I was reading oral histories of all the women astronauts that had flown, uh, when I got to Mary Cleave's oral history interview, it's like, this is a person I really want to meet. I really want to hang out with. I would like to have a beer with. Fortunately, all those things got to happen later. It's not always true. You can't do that with Einstein or Hawking.
Right. All right.
But I did get to hang out with Mary Cleave, and it was super fun. So I think it's that just spark of joy that manifests itself as personal charisma. And it's like, gosh, even if I can't meet this person, I would have wanted to.
Right. Right.
I'm not sure that's a very profound answer. I think that's what drives
that works
most people
perfectly.
to hang out with most other people. It's like, John, he seems really interesting. I'm listening to his talk up there. It's like, I hope I get to hang out with him later. It's the same as we do with our, it's how we build friends.
Right. Right. No, I totally understand that. So with that, knowing that there's that spark, that thing, down the road here, do you have any personalities or figures that you aspire to do a profile on or a story about?
I'm looking over at my desk where I know there's a notepad with a list of names on it. So the answer is yes.
Right.
Now, whether any of these will happen, who knows? At the same time, again, I'm going to stick with the astronauts book. I guess that's the second most recent book to come out, so that's why it's on my mind. But you don't always know until you stumble into reading about this person. Just the other day, my wife forwarded me a brief article about the first woman to earn a PhD in Italy, and it's like in the 1600s. And it's like, I had no idea that happened that early in the history of PhDs. I don't even know how long there have been PhDs, frankly, but that seems like it's pretty early. And so just these chance encounters with names, and then seeing how far down that I don't want to call it a rabbit hole. It's called a science hole. That's even worse. But
But when you think about it, 1600s, scientists were still kind of heretics at times, right?
Oh yeah. That, I think that was even a New York Times crossword puzzle clue a week or so ago. Status of scientists during the Renaissance, and it was heretic. It's like, really? Maybe, I guess.
Right.
But yeah, this challenging of orthodoxy is a big part of science, of course.
Sure.
And so that also can make for a very interesting story,
right,
too.
It keeps us alive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh man, is my arm still sore?
Right. Yeah.
I think I'm a week out from the second dose, so I'm getting close to being fully shielded.
Yep, 5 days out for me. So yes.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
So in like a week, we could theoretically get together.
Let's thank the scientists for this.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Right. Okay, so this is where we get to do some shameless self-promotion. You've got books coming out. You've got books that are out now. What would you like to talk about real quick?
Oh gosh, I'd love for you to choose. Is that fair? I shouldn't.
No,
I mean,
it's not.
It's not fair. All right.
What's fascinating to me is the adaptation process, and because of your experience now with this, oftentimes we're still in this conversation in the education space where there's this misunderstanding or undervalue of an adapted book. Talk about your process of how you break down dialogue, descriptions, settings, and how that informs with the way you do the book. Because you're not cutting anything out.
Oh, you're cutting a ton out, actually.
But
I mean, I ran the numbers, and there's about 10,000 words in the adaptation, and there's 120,000 words in the original book. So most of the words are gone. You get pictures,
right,
to compensate.
Because those words describe the setting, correct?
A lot of it does. Oh gosh, is that true of Wilson's original? It's been a while. As
That's
you
all right.
know, the process of putting together a graphic novel, even after the script is done, then you're looking at a year plus.
Right.
Probably, I think in this case it was 2 years plus of drawing for a 200 and some page book. So I can't remember how much is scene setting and how much isn't in the original. Uh, but regardless,
Right.
yes, you're doing all those things. There's reading and rereading the book. And again, I can't claim to be an expert on this. I've done it once now, so now I know how to do that for this book. If I
Right.
were to do it again, I wouldn't be at all surprised if some lessons learned transferred, but others it's like, this thing that I thought I knew how to do for this text doesn't work for this text. Um,
But you're doing everything. You're doing the art, the word balloons, the scripting, all that stuff. That's all you, correct?
no, I do not do the art.
Oh, okay.
In fact, yeah, for none of the books, there'll be I will occasionally sketch something out when it's easier to show an artist
Okay.
what I'm thinking of on the page than it is to tell them. But no, nobody would pay good money for my artwork. I leave that to my betters, and there are plenty of them out there. So, gosh, it was mostly breaking things down to a theme, finding the spine of the book, finding an arc of a story, um, brutally slicing away things that don't belong to that. And so, for a 250-page prose work of nonfiction, you can fit a lot of content in.
Right.
You just don't get comics are efficient, but they're not more efficient than prose, I wouldn't say, for this type of story. So there were things that we had to take away. So I had to find one of the spines of Wilson's book and carry that through and get rid of things that didn't belong. One of the things that meant was ending the book in a different place than he ended his.
Mm,
And I'll tell you, that was a stomach churning thing to do and submit to the editor, because it's like, I'm changing your ending.
all right.
Everybody was fine with it, fortunately. So I guess I made a good choice. And Chris Butzer, who did the drawing, really did a beautiful job making our conclusion a satisfying one for this. But it's a lot of, that old cliche. It's a lot of killing your darlings. Fortunately, they were not so
Right.
much my darlings as Ed Wilson's darlings.
That's
So it
what,
was probably
yeah.
a little easier in
Okay.
this
And
case.
I
I feel like
got
I'm
it.
rambling and not really giving you a
No, no,
good answer
no,
to your
no, no,
question.
you're fine. There's a point made earlier about for this type of book,
Hmm.
the pictures don't necessarily make it better, or that, can you talk
More
a little bit
efficient.
more efficient? Okay.
Images aren't necessarily a more efficient form of storytelling.
For this book.
Yeah, and there are some abstract concepts that he wants to get across, and I think in those cases, images help a ton,
Right.
because you can do a lot of layering of information on top of each other. Uh, layer Place a lot of layers on top of each other. For talking about how getting really into depth about how somebody feels, say, about a particular instance in their youth, that actually, I think, at least the way I've done it, that takes a lot of space to effectively show complex, and here again, I'll use the word again, layered emotions, because you need to show each one clearly. And you can use color, you can use thoughts, and of course you can use expressions, but uh, let's take a German word that people might have verklempt.
Mm-hmm.
Show verklempt in a single image. There's a lot going on
Yeah.
when you're overcome by the emotional impact of something beautiful that you're seeing, that is calling to mind a previous experience. this is German too. Lots of layering in a single word, but words do things efficiently, sometimes more efficiently than pictures.
Right.
So there's these trade-offs that you make.
It depends, right?
Yeah.
The best phrase you could put to that is it depends.
Yep. There you go. Thank you.
All
So
right.
you can cut all the last 5 minutes of me talking and say, what
No,
Jim really meant to say is it depends.
we're leaving that. We're leaving that. But tell you what, we're good. We're going to go ahead and wrap this up.
Okay.
We've got a bunch of your books, the GT Labs line in Comics Plus. Probably my favorite of all of them is Dignifying Science. I love that because there was so much more that you brought to these people.
That's really nice to hear.
The Oppenheimer story was fantastic. Yes, go ahead, please hold that up.
Oh, sure. Yeah. There's Dignifying Science with a startling cover that's Hedy Lamar. But if you want to know why Hedy Lamar belongs in a book about science and scientists,
how many patents did she have?
It wasn't that many.
Kind of intense.
But when you make the patent that eventually leads to cell phones working, maybe you've done enough.
I think so. All right. Thanks again, Jim Ottaviani at GT Labs, for being part of the Publisher Spotlight. Really appreciate your time. On behalf of LibraryPass and Comics Plus, thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
You're quite welcome. Thank you for having me. I really enjoyed talking to you again.